Lover's Moon, a novel by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors.
Chapter 2. Gail. Mine's bigger than yours, I panted. Your what? My man card. It's bigger than yours. He flipped me off, but I just laughed and pushed harder. Hot, sticky sweat dripped down my face. I leaned forward. The rhythm was intoxicating, the strain of my muscles both painful and exhilarating. Fuck yes, I moaned, hearing my voice waver. I took another deep breath. Faster! It comes out as a whisper as I pushed harder. Almost there. I forced all my energy into my legs and pumped my arms. All I could hear was the sound of my sneakers hitting the pavement. Sweat ran into my eyes, and I could barely see my destination, but I knew that the stairs leading down to Gansevoort Street signaled the southern end of the High Line. I pressed on, reached the stairs, and bounded down them 2 at a time. Yes! I hit the concrete at the bottom, stopped the timer on my watch, and put my hands up over my head, Rocky style, to celebrate my victory. When Benjamin caught up to me, I was still dancing. He stopped when he reached me and bent over, hands on his knees, to catch his breath. You okay there, pal? I asked, slapping his back a little harder than I needed to. He stood up, his face flushed, and glared at me. What did that even mean? What did what mean? That thing about my man card. I said mine's bigger than yours. He sniffed. That is so unladylike. I pretended to consider that remark. Suck my dick, I replied. Ben did not laugh. Jesus, Gail. He started walking away from me and I followed, laughing. What's wrong? Don't like it when a girl beats you? Why does everything have to be like this with you? He said. I opened my mouth in a hot retort, but I stopped when I saw the look on his face. Normally, we love to tease each other, but my brother was clearly not in the mood today. Everything isn't like this, whatever this means. I thought we were just having some fun. We were having fun until it became a contest. That's how you are about everything. If you can't win physically, you have to get in the last word. If you can't get in the last word, you make sure you get in the meanest word. Whoa. Ben, what the hell? This is our thing. We tease each other. I just wanted to hang out with you, Gail. Have a conversation. You had to turn it into an Olympic event. Olympic event? Please. I stayed quiet for a second, but then couldn't help myself. I could kick those bitch boys' asses. He glared at me and then walked away. Ben, I said, come on. I'm just trying to make you laugh. Not everything is a competition, Gail, he shouted back. I don't want to fight you. I want to talk. People were staring at us, but I didn't care. I've seen way worse on New York City streets. Then let's talk, I called. He was far enough away that I had to yell now, but he didn't even turn around, just raised one hand over his head in dismissal. Ben had always been my partner in crime, the only reason I knew how to stick up for myself in the first place. He taught me the art of a street fight when I should have been playing with baby dolls. But something was wrong today. I glanced at my watch. I should have gone after him and apologized, but I knew I would barely make it to the shop on time as it was. Call me when you can talk, I texted him. I put my phone in the pocket of my leggings and then fished it out again, and added, and I'm sorry. I didn't know exactly what I was sorry for, but it would have to do for now. I crossed Washington Street and grabbed a smoothie from my favorite bodega. I continued east, enjoying the afternoon sunshine. Even a fight with my brother couldn't ruin a post-run high. He, of all people, should know that I needed the adrenaline kick. He knew what I'd been going through lately. He knew all the stress I felt from running the shop. If I didn't get this energy out of my system, my brain would explode all over the first customer of my shift. Not a good way to own a business. Still, the nagging feeling that I had screwed up was creeping into my endorphin rush. Maybe I should go after him? Family first. I could practically hear Mom saying it now, just like she had said it every day of our lives. As if she repeated a cliched slogan enough times, it would make up for her absolute lack of parenting. I didn't buy into most of what my mother had said over the years. All of that blood is thicker than water bullshit. I'd choose most of my girlfriends over my blood relatives any day of the week. That's what happens when you're raised in a family of crazy old bats who are one turban away from Grey Gardens. My poor brother was the lone boy in our clan, and he'd been doted on until he was practically smothered. The only attention I ever got was when I screwed up. How is a girl who's always in trouble going to take care of her brother, Gail? I stopped walking. That man card crack wasn't cool. Ben was the only blood relative I actually cared about, and instead of being there for him, I'd been too consumed by my own needs. Screw work, I had to go after my brother. Family first! I turned quickly and went after him. I knew Ben would walk all the way back to his place, but my stomach dropped when I saw a familiar figure ahead of me. My boyfriend, Jonathan, stepped out of a brownstone. Jonathan didn't live in this area. He lived in Brooklyn, and he was supposed to be at work right now. He'd told me he had to work all weekend to get caught up on a backlog with an important client. I could have easily caught up to him, but I remained rooted in my spot, dread filling my gut. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was his doppelganger. I read once that every human has 6 identical lookalikes around the world. If I was ever going to see one of Jonathan's lookalikes, it would be here in Manhattan. I mean, half the men in this city look like him. This particular man was the same height, wore an identical gray business suit, and walked with the same little hitch in his right leg that Jonathan had. Maybe he was coming to surprise me. But he was headed in the wrong direction. Maybe he was going to buy flowers. But why had he stopped at this random house? Just a few steps behind him, a gorgeous blonde woman came out the same door. Their body language was easy enough to read, even from this distance. Jonathan placed his hand on the small of her back, and she smiled up at him. The gulp of smoothie I'd just taken turned to cement in my mouth, and I had to swallow hard to get it down. I knew this feeling well. Far too well. When you've been cheated on as many times as I have, an instinct kicks in, a knowledge of an all-too-familiar feeling. Each time I dated someone new, I hoped I was rid of that cynicism, and each time it returned like an irritating rash. "You're overreacting," I muttered to myself, between deep breaths. "It's probably nothing." Someday it would be nothing. Someday I would meet a man, think he was up to something sketchy, and be wrong about it. It would be his sister, or a cousin, or a work colleague. I couldn't wait for the day when my suspicions were unfounded. But I followed Jonathan anyway. They walked a few blocks south and headed into a diner. If his hand on her back didn't tell me what I needed to know, the way she wiggled her ass and bumped her hip into his did. Cousins don't walk like that together. Part of my brain still refused to see what was right in front of me. If my eyes weren't deceiving me, that would make Jonathan the 3rd cheater in a row. What does that tell you about my judgment in men? I was so close to turning around and just walking away. I could have continued on my path back to my apartment, where I would take a shower, grab a sandwich, and take over the evening shift at the shop. When I called Jonathan later, he would have told me that he stayed up late last night working on actuarial tables or, I don't know, whatever the hell it is that finance bros do with their time. It would have been a lie, but I could have lived with that lie for a little while longer. At that moment, I so wished I was the type of woman who could live in ignorant bliss. Maybe people who turn away from their partner's bullshit are just happier overall. Unfortunately, I am not that woman. Maybe Ben was right about my need to win all the time. They sat down 3 tables back, holding hands across the table, laughing about something. She was so blonde and so young. I placed her in her early 20s. Unblemished, smooth white skin, high cheekbones, taut breasts, slim, boyish hips. I took my focus off them and caught my own reflection in the window. At 35, I wasn't exactly old, but I was definitely disheveled. My hair had fallen out of the loose bun I'd worn that morning, and sweat had caked the strands onto my neck. My face was mottled and red from the exertion of running, and I didn't need to duck my nose into my shirt to know that I smelled horrible. I could have still taken the dignified route here. I could have called him and left a voice message and told him calmly that we were over and he should pick up all of his shit from my place. I could have sent a letter. I could have pretended I didn't see anything. But I didn't. A strange confidence overtook me, and I recognized it. It was the same feeling I'd had when I'd seen Ben a few steps ahead of me on our run. I had to win. I strode into the diner. Jonathan was facing the door like the douche canoe that he is. What kind of man doesn't even try to hide? When he saw me, he yanked his hands out of hers, knocking a water glass over. "Gail," he said, "I can explain." "No, you really can't," I said. I slowly removed the lid and straw from my cup, extended my arm, and dumped the smoothie over his head. Turning on my heel, I walked out of the diner slowly, as if I didn't even notice the sputtering and cursing mess behind me. Not only had I ruined his stupid business suit, but he was probably about to have a very tense conversation with the Barbie doll. As for me, I was free of him. But when I stepped out of the diner and resumed my walk home, I had to fight back tears. That was the thing about winning. It was never as satisfying as I thought it would be.
You've been listening to Lover's Moon, a paranormal romantic comedy by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Lover's Moon is book 5 in the Canadian Werewolf Series, published by Stark Publishing and available in print, ebook, and audiobook. The music used in this production, Waltz Primordial by Kevin MacLeod featuring Alexander Nakarada, was licensed via Incomptech.com and is copyrighted by Kevin MacLeod.